Ever since I started attending school, each year my mom asked me a question. Who is the smartest kid in your class? The first time I heard that question, I didn't know what to say, so I asked her, how does one know which kid is the smartest? To which she replied by saying, it's the kid with the highest grades. But is that true? Well, imagine that you're one of those kids who have always excelled in school. Your teachers and family members call you things like genius, talented, gifted. Over time, you absorb these words like ink sinking into paper, shaping your sense of self. You start believing that intelligence is not something you build, but something you are. After all, you're gifted. It just so happens that I am one of those former gifted kids. And for a while, I believed it. I believed that being gifted meant I was special. But it's not true. Because before you know it, you start falling behind, losing motivation, and repeatedly asking yourself, what have I done wrong? Some of you may be familiar with the term gifted kid burnout. Even though it started appearing on many social media platforms as a joke, many people relate to it, as it perfectly describes that pivotal moment when the brilliance people once praised feels like a distant memory, and all that remains is exhaustion and self-doubt. But why are talented children, who are supposedly our society's hope for a brighter future, so vulnerable to burning out? In my experience of receiving the gifted kid label, I've noticed that it primarily comes down to the toxic expectations placed on students. Because when you are raised in the belief that your only value is in getting good grades, it becomes part of your core identity. Deep down, I knew my mom was looking for only one answer to her question. She wanted me to say that I was the smartest one in my class. Growing up, these expectations enormously impacted me as a person. I became very competitive and felt the need to be the best at everything. It didn't apply to academics only. It also includes sports, arts, and even such meaningless things as winning the board game during family reunions. I started feeling anxious at the thought of not being able to fulfill this, and even more, thinking that maybe I'm not as smart as I'm supposed to be. Gifted children often find themselves entangled in the relentless grip of perfectionism. Research by Howitt and Flett from 1989 highlights the three types of perfectionism: self-oriented, other-oriented, and socially prescribed. Meanwhile, the Frost multidimensional perfectionism scale from 1990 further dissects its intrapersonal roots, linking it to fear of mistakes, self-doubt, and overwhelming parental expectations. This stems from multiple factors. Their early successes create an illusion of effortless excellence. Their friendships with all their peers set unattainably high benchmarks. And when learning at school does not pose a challenge for them, they replace the genuine intellectual development with the pursuit of impeccable results. Ironically, the very intelligence that sets them apart can also become a deep source of irritation, as their high cognitive abilities outpace their emotional resilience, leaving them vulnerable to stress, burnout, and the perpetual fear of failure. Even in environments designed to nurture them, perfectionistic educators and competitive peers can amplify these tendencies. Ultimately, while giftedness opens doors to extraordinary potential, it also fosters an unforgiving inner dialogue, where success is never enough and the possibility of failure feels catastrophic. Now, imagine what happens when a gifted kid struggles for the first time. If intelligence is something they simply have, then struggling must mean they have lost it, right? Another research on this phenomenon, conducted by Carol Dweck, reveals a fundamental truth. When children are told they are gifted, they often develop a fixed mindset. They believe that intelligence is something you either have or don't, rather than something you cultivate. It is usually displayed in gifted kids not taking challenges, seeing constructive criticism as a personal attack, and playing it safe, choosing only the tasks they know they can master instantly. My fixed mindset resulted in the quick abandonment of new activities if I wasn't already great at them when starting them. For instance, when I was attending music school, I was quickly giving up on trying to play more complex musical pieces if I couldn't get them right instantly. It was frustrating me to the point that I actually ended up giving up playing piano at all after finishing my 4 years of music school. My fixed mindset also manifested in my academic work. I slowly stopped speaking up in class in fear of making a mistake and being seen as stupid. This belief that talents are unchangeable and you can develop them causes gifted children to underperform. However, it isn't limited only to the kids with the gifted label, but also children who suffer from overly high expectations in general. I've noticed this recently, especially when I look at my cousin, who is often compared to me by our family members. She has to attend additional English classes because I did. She has to start learning Spanish because I did. She has to have straight A's because I did. We may also attribute this abnormality to our education system. After all, at some point in our education, our focus shifts solely to getting good grades instead of actually gaining knowledge. Well, that's what we need to get into good universities, that will get us good jobs, and later on good salaries, right? So we begin to determine how smart we are based on the numbers on the papers our teachers give us. We live in a world that worships talent, but neglects growth. Once I got labeled as gifted, I started receiving less support than my peers because I was deemed capable enough to not need it. The approach of my educators was pretty much of, oh, she's smart. She'll figure it out. I was taught, like many gifted kids are taught, that my value and my worth went only as far as I could get good grades. A lot of kids from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s are reckoning with this right now. After being raised in the belief that your only value is in getting good grades, you realize that the real world does not care about good grades. I left my town and started school here. And I did not have the functionality of my peers, which had never been addressed before. I was a weird kid. I didn't know how to make friends. I didn't know how to organize my work. I didn't know how to keep a schedule. These were things that I did not need to do previously. The only important thing in my life were my academic achievements, which never posed a big challenge, as I used to absorb knowledge like a sponge absorbs water. As a result, I also never learned how to study. So instead of being taught these skills, I've always been expected to just figure it out on my own. So how do we escape this cycle? According to Carol Dweck, the way in which we should face the problem of fixed mindsets is developing growth mindsets. Intelligence is not a delicate, fragile thing preserved in a glass case only to shatter at the first sign of difficulty. It is a muscle. It grows stronger with practice. Those with a growth mindset see mistakes not as proof of failure, but stepping stones to improvement. Obviously, developing a growth mindset is not easy, as overlooking your insecurities and staying motivated can be extremely difficult. Personally, I struggle with that a lot, And I don't know if I will ever get rid of my fixed mindset. Even though I try to approach myself less critically, I usually fail to do so. We must acknowledge that the best people who do what they love don't just do it. They appreciate it and love it. I was convinced from an early age that my academic achievements would lead me to becoming a doctor, as that's what my parents always wanted. Growing up with this belief that being smart was the only thing that was really lovable about me, I felt obligated to satisfy them. So I used to say that's also what I wanted. However, last year I realized that it's not what I want. I love humanities subjects, I love history, literature, and I enjoy debating. I see myself more in the profession of a lawyer, and I believe that this is what would make me happy. So I want to pursue it. We must learn to reconnect with learning for joy, not for validation. Play an instrument not for awards, but for the sheer love of music. Read not to impress, but to be moved. Pursue knowledge not to prove your worth, but to enrich your mind. However, this whole talk isn't only aimed at young people struggling with burnout or high expectations. It's also a message to the adults. Intelligence is not something you have, it's something you develop. If our education system promoted a growth mindset instead of mindlessly labeling kids, we could allow students to thrive and prevent burnout. Whether you're a parent or a teacher, don't put too much pressure on kids and teens. Let them learn at their own pace and allow them to make mistakes. After all, just like Albert Einstein once said, a person who never made a mistake never tried anything new. Thank you.